Hey everyone, it's Marianne Pizzatola, President of the New York City Organization of Public Service Retirees, and today I have yet another retiree with me, Gene Iannuzzi. Welcome, Gene.
Hello, morning. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, except when I look at some of the things that are going on. But
I agree. So
otherwise, I'm in good shape.
tell me a little bit about yourself. Let's introduce yourself to everyone, who you are, what you did, and let's talk about some of these issues that we have going on that's bothering you.
Yeah, well, I began my career with city service back in the early 1980s with the Health and Hospitals Corporation. First as an RN, and at North Central Bronx Hospital. Then I went to the Emergency Medical Service, which I'm sure you're familiar with, where I was actually a nurse at the MS Academy as one of the instructors. And then I left city service because I was young, stupid, and didn't understand about pensions. And I went on for quite a while working in the private sector as an RN, as a paramedic. And I came back to city service in the late 1990s and early 2000s, teaching paramedics at Berman at Community College. And also I went back to North Central Bronx. And eventually I retired as a full-time assistant professor from BMCC, having cobbled together 20 years of service out of this crazy quilt of a career. And I've been retired for about 4 years now.
Very good.
2 years ago, my wife was diagnosed with lung cancer.
I'm sorry.
And no, I appreciate that. And even though we caught it early, there has been a 2-year roller coaster ride of surgery, hospitalizations, chemotherapy, radiation, a period of remission, relapse, more therapy, now immunotherapy, lots of side effects from those things. And since this whole business with the Medicare Advantage thing started, of course, my ears went up, because as a healthcare professional, I know that Medicare Advantage is a total scam. And also I was very, very concerned about us getting our insurance switched in the middle of all of these treatments. So of course, that's when I tried to step in and do whatever I can with our group to try to achieve the goals we're working for. Lately, since January, the issue of copays has come up. And there's been a lot of discussion on our page on Facebook, et cetera, and among retirees about copays. And as part of that discussion, I said, just for interest's sake, let me go back and look since January 1st of how many visits just my wife had to go through, not even talking about me. And between doctor's visits, treatments, none of which were inpatient, this is all outpatient since then. To date, 66 visits.
Wow.
Each of which, according to the EOBs I've been getting, explanations of benefits, each which we will be charged a copay for, which amounts to over $900, close to $1,000. Throw in a few of my visits, because I'm 71 years old and, the car's got 100,000 miles on it and it needs to get the oil changed every now and then. And we're already up over $1,000. Now, that having been said, we're lucky. Both of us have reasonably good retirement resources. So while there is a sting to this, and we haven't been billed for all of them yet, because you know how the insurance companies work.
Takes a few months.
It's not even that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. The left hand doesn't even know there's a right hand. So we can manage this now. Moving forward, I have no idea what this is going to bring. And even though we can manage it, I have a real concern for my fellow retirees who are older than me, sicker than me, alone, widowed, making far less money in their pensions. And believe me, I'm not one of these people that's making those six-figure pensions. I think my pension is about $33,000 plus whatever I get in Social Security. So I'm okay, but I'm certainly not living the high life. And those people who don't even have what I have, the low-wage worker, the person who retired 20 years ago when wages were not as high, those people are being devastated by this. They are being forced to make choices that are unconscionable. In addition to that, I'm lucky, and my wife is lucky in the sense, like I said, we're both nurses. We worked in the system. We deal with insurance. We know how to deal with this stuff. Most of the people that we've been encountering in the group, and even in discussions I've had with people offline, they don't know how to read an EOB. They don't know who to call to resolve a problem. They don't know whether the person in the billing office is giving them a correct story. And I'm not saying that all these people are acting with malice towards them. They're not. They're very, very often just operating with incomplete information.
Correct. So
how do you advocate for these people as to say this ain't what we were promised? We were promised lower wages, good job, union protections for superior benefits at the end. So when people say, well, again, you should be paying for a part of your health insurance. Yeah, I did for 20 years, okay?
We did.
Because if I had worked in the private sector, maybe I wouldn't have as good coverage, but I sure would have a whole lot more income and more resource to have thrown in the bank, however poorly I managed that. So I have to use my voice right now while I'm still able to speak for all of us, to say, oh, enough of this already. This is an ageist, inappropriate way of dealing with the problem. We live in a society where older people are not valued. They are seen as an impediment to progress. They are seen as a burden. And despite all of the words of our politicians, that's not the case, that we respect our elders, blah, 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 their actions speak differently.
Right.
And not just the politicians. Our unions, not all. I'm very lucky. My union, when I retired, was the Professional Staff Congress. They have been absolutely opposed to this since the get-go. That is not the case with most of the other unions.
Right.
They signed off on this. On one hand, thank you for your service. On the other hand, go screw yourself. You'd have to be a blind person not to be able to see that.
And the largest thing we keep, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, because
We constantly hear that my union's not doing anything, or my union won't take my phone calls, and I have to remind them, you're retired. They're no longer your union. Like they're
right.
not. They don't technically represent you, and yet the city and the unions put us in this position because whether we want to believe it or face the facts or not, the city cannot change our health care unilaterally. The MLC, they tried to do that once before, and the MLC sued them, and they won. And any healthcare change has to be negotiated between the two of them. However, those changes have to be effective for the actives, not for a retiree. And the city should be honoring the promises that they made in the past to a retired person, and that's not happening. The two of them, the MLC and the unions, negotiated this copay thing. They did this, and I have to keep saying this because people will say, no, that didn't happen. My union wouldn't have done that. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that actually did happen.
Well, I think, unfortunately, some of the unions, they look at their union heads as almost like cult-like figures. And they respond in that way, oh, he'd never do that to us. Yeah. Well, here's the evidence that he did it. Oh, no, that can't be right. Okay, they delivered for me all the time that I was working. Yeah, they did. Well, you ain't them no more. And that's become painfully evident. Yeah, it's painfully evident.
It is. It's painful to recognize that your former union that you knew would never have done this is doing this.
Is doing it. Well, it's an abusive relationship, and it's got all the characteristics of it. They come back, they punch you in the face, and you say, oh, that was terrible. And you say, oh, I'm sorry, I'll never do that again. And then they do it again, and you keep coming back for more until you're smart enough to get out. And that's what we see happening. I mean, I'm one of the moderators on the Facebook page, and I constantly have people coming back at me that said, oh, well, these people protected us. So, why should I believe you now? Well, here's the evidence. Why not? And they can't wrap their heads around it. They can't conceive of it happening. And even when you bring it up to say, look, if all of these plans, whether it's the implementation of MAP or whether it's the imposition of copays, if these were such beneficial things, why were they sort of low-key snuck under the radar for everybody?
Yeah.
If they were negotiated back years ago, you would think if this was something that was like super duper, hey, wow, number one, that they'd be shouting from the rooftops, look at how good we are. Instead, it's like, yeah, we're going to do this, and you don't have to do anything, and we're just going to opt you in, and everything's cool. And, still we have plenty of people who don't even know this is going on.
No, we don't.
Okay?
It's exactly.
And then the copay thing, yeah, sure. It's buried in some letter you get, which usually starts off with like, in an effort to provide the best care for our, retirees, we have negotiated with such and such to do such and such and blah, 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 blah. And then in paragraph 12, bend over, here it comes again. If you're doing something that's helpful, you lead with what you're doing, not with all the propaganda surrounding it. So why I wanted to come and talk to you today, do this, is again, because I'm not suffering financially yet, but I know that I'm not because other people spoke up for me. And I know that there are people who are in their 80s or who are even in their 60s that are dealing with devastating diseases on their own And now they've got to fight their insurance companies or make decisions. I talked to my wife this morning about all of this. And she said, yeah, I mean, if we didn't have the means, maybe I'd have to be negotiating with my doctor to say, hey, instead of seeing me 3 times this month, can you see me once? Or, kind of rationing your own care, which is insanity.
We actually have a retiree who was a cancer survivor, and her cancer is back. And the doctors had advised her that it was time again to do, weekly treatment. And she determined she can't do it, and her choice is to not go through with it because it's just not affordable for her. And then to go through that, and if it caused more issues like it did the last time, she wouldn't be able to sustain that.
Yeah, no.
So these are decisions that they're not taking into consideration when they say, well, we'll just give you a $15 copay. Well, a $15 copay doesn't have the same impact on a retiree as it does on an active. The actives are still working, they're making overtime, they have good salaries, they have salaries larger than ours. Our people, remember, even our police and firefighters who retired in the 70s, their average salary back then was $15,000. So, you start thinking about some of those decisions, or people who are civilians who have the same pensions today, who are, because they were in civilian titles, their pensions are under $20,000, under $25,000. They do not have the means to do this. And this was punitive strictly to make sure that every person that could went into that Medicare Advantage plan that the city and the unions negotiated, because they touted that plan as not having the amount of copays and having finance caps. So they designed this on purpose to punitively hurt you if you stayed in the plan that you'd had for 50 years, or you go into their plan that they wanted to, that would benefit the unions and the city.
Right, and they dress it up in language that nobody understands. And a lot of professions do that. They have their own buzzwords and their own language, and you're supposed to just smile and nod, and well, they're the experts.
Well, it's just marketing. I mean,
exactly.
And the rides and the meals and the Fitbit, and and you talk to seniors, and the seniors are going, I don't need a Fitbit.
Yeah,
I live in a rural area. I'll never be able to use those rides. My doctors, my specialists are more than 30 miles away, or the meals are only by prior authorization if you have a qualifying event. I am sick to the point that I'm not going to be hospitalized or have that kind of a qualifying event. So these perks, it's just a sheer savings to the insurer, because they will never be utilized by a large portion of the retirees.
Listen, anybody who's in healthcare, when they heard the term managed care, right? We're going back to the 90s now. Okay,
we are going back before that to the hip days of the 80s.
Well, yeah. I mean, whenever I heard the term managed care, I knew what it was all about. It's managed cost. It has nothing to do with effectiveness of care. It's about, we could treat you effectively with this, cutting edge treatment, and it would be much, much better for you if you got that. But, this thing's been around for 20 years, and, maybe it'll help you, maybe it won't, but it costs a lot less. So that's what we're going to approve. And when I worked for a brief period in home care, visiting nurse service, which my wife also worked for, we fought with insurance companies all the time about stupidity like that. And look, it would be wonderful if we lived in an ideal world where, Medicare for all, we had unlimited resources, etc. But then on the flip side, we have too many people who, let the perfect become the enemy of the good. We have a battle to fight now. It's not the whole picture. It's not going to change the whole healthcare system, but it's going to fix this little part of it. And this little part of it screams to be fixed, and can then be used as an example for what people can do when they put aside a lot of their petty divisions, because, you know, in our group, we've got liberals, conservatives, Republicans, Democrats, know nothing, Whigs. We have people who voted for one guy, voted for another guy, hate this candidate, hate that candidate. And guess what? We've all managed to say, okay, but this we can agree on.
Yeah.
This shall not stand. And that's the way you defeat these things, okay? Not by going for pie in the sky, but by looking for something that you can do. And so far, we've done it. And we need to continue to do it. And we need not to be willing to settle for, you know, the plea bargain deal. Like, okay, we'll leave you alone, but we'll do the copays, and, you know, maybe we'll mess with your Part B and all that. No. That's not the contract. That's not what you said.
There's so much on the table right now because the unions feel that they are so desperate. They're looking at literally a fire sale. From what we're hearing from the unions that are talking to us, that the MLC is pretty much putting everything on the table to come up with savings that they couldn't realize in the last 2 years because of our lawsuit to stop the city from doing this. Now, that surely should tell you something, that they are still looking to sell off our health insurance, still looking to sell off the benefits that we have, modify 12-126 of the administrative code, which sets the HIP HMO cap, which is the benchmark that the city must pay up to for all of our plans, active and retiree and dependent. Our plans, if you take the GHI senior care, for example, is under $200 a month. You look at an actives plan, and those plans are over $800 a month. We are not the ones that are bankrupting them. And the other thing is then to start looking at where the money is coming from. But see, we are low-hanging fruit. Retirees, we don't vote. We don't vote for the contract. We don't vote for the union officers. So they thought they would get away with, surely, by making these changes. And like I said to you before, the unions, the MLC is the unions. Make no doubt about that. It is 100 something unions. But there's a whole nother secret circle in that, because no one will tell us what unions are in it, but there's 100 and something in there.
Right.
So the unions make up the MLC and the city, and they both must negotiate and agree upon any change to our health care. So in 12-126, that sets the cap of what the city has to pay up to, and anything over that you pay. It also sets in place our Medicare B reimbursement. And these were things that were in place since 1967. So now with 12-126, now that the unions and the city are talking about killing every plan on the table, modifying 12-126, getting rid of Medicare B reimbursement, killing every plan on the table and forcing you into a Medicare Advantage plan, leaving you with no options. And for those that are not retired, they'll be surprised to know, if they don't know anyone who is retired and lives outside of the New York metro area, it becomes harder and harder to find doctors in the area in which you retire to, because many of those plans are not taken, which is why we had plans like Cigna, for example, which covered retirees in Arizona. So they were regional, and this was the reason that many of those other plans were put into place. The Empire plan was because it covered a region that maybe GHI didn't for the non-Medicare eligible that lived outside of the metro area. For the unions and the city to be willing to negotiate or literally cut all of this out, things that we negotiated for, we paid for, we gave up to keep in our tenures, to benefit them today is sadistic.
That's absolutely the word for it. And they are trading on the fact that today's workforce is much more of a transient workforce.
Yes.
Okay.
Not same job for 30 years or 40 years.
I mean, just look at the turnover in our former agency of, the EMS side of the fire department. The turnover is tremendous. And they're not all going to become firefighters. They're getting out altogether.
Correct.
Okay. So they're looking at that and saying, well, yeah, okay, fine. We can shove this past people because those people are not invested as much. There's not that same
generation.
It's not the same cadre of people that are going to say, I'm going to work for the city for 20, 25 years, and then I'm going to retire with a pension and whatever. you've got people with a completely different career path and a completely different financial picture.
Our generation more look to prepare for our futures. Today's generation wants right now. They want the wage right now. They don't care about later.
Yeah. Well, I made that mistake myself. Okay, I always thought, well, you know, I got time, and then one day you realize you don't have time. And for someone in a position of authority, be they an HR person, be they a union leader, be they a union rep, to not caution the individual to say, hey, look, I get where you're coming from.
Yep.
No problem. But you might want to consider this. You're 25 now, blink of an eye, you're going to be 45. Blink of an eye, you're going to be 55, and you're going to be saying, what the hell happened? Okay? And then all of a sudden, all the things that have been shoved at you, like tier 6, like reduced benefits, like managed care, all of a sudden you'll realize, why didn't anybody tell me about this? And a lot of people, I mean, a lot of people won't be telling you, but then a lot of other people, which is a problem I have talking to people now, they say, well, nobody told me this. And I'll say, I've been telling you this since last October.
Yes.
Why don't you listen? Okay.
No, my
but
answer
to
to
not
that
say it at all is criminal.
Yeah, I keep saying the same thing over and over again. Your kids, I say, do your kids listen to you? And they say no. I said, why would these kids listen to us? It's the same mentality. They're going to learn the hard way when they get to where we are.
It's going to be harder because there's not a lot of places for them to go.
No.
Okay. It's
well,
not
and the interesting conversation I had with a few union leaders a couple weeks ago about the New York State single payer plan, because they all put out an opposition memo to it, to the state representatives. And I said, why did you do that? And they were like, well, all their opposition memos basically said the same thing. It said, well, we negotiated over the years of our employment, we negotiated things away. We gave away benefits. We gave up increases in pay in order to keep our benefits. So we should be able to keep what we have and not be forced into this state single payer plan. And I said, that's really interesting, because that's what we've been telling.
Where have we heard that before?
That's what we've been telling you since last year when you tried to force us into this one plan. So it literally, you're like, is anybody home? Because that's exactly what we've been saying to you. Why is it okay for you to force us into one plan and give up everything we paid for and negotiated, but it's not okay for you? It's disturbing. It's disturbing on so many levels. But I want to if there's something else you want to add, because we're probably about our 30-minute mark, and I want to wrap this up. Otherwise, we tend to lose people if we talk too long. So, is there something you want to close with, or you want to add to the message?
No, I agree. Well, there was a phrase I heard a long time ago that says, honor dies where interest lies. And let me put it this way. If it's not obvious to the retirees now that there's a lot of people with different interests, okay, who will shake your hand and pat you on the back, and at the same time lift your wallet, you're very naive.
No.
And I'll just go one step further. If you think that the politician who is taking their picture with you today is not going to flip their position completely tomorrow when somebody else shows up to take a picture, you're also incredibly naive.
Like the mayor did.
Well, all you have to see is what's been going on with primaries, where one guy's trying to cut out the other guy. It's just
crazy. But I know you and I are on the same page with these issues, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to discuss with us your personal situation, and your wife's situation, and then how you recognize how it impacts you, and your concern for those that don't have the means like yourself, that you're able to go through the finances of it, but that you fully recognize that if your income was slightly different, that it would affect you a lot differently, which is half of our workforce, our retirees
Yeah.
at this point. So, and I'm already telling you that they are feeling it, and they're making, those decisions, that they're having to change their life in their 80s and 90s, or 70s, 80s and 90s, because they do not have the means to withstand the copays, simply because they are trying to protect their health, but then they have to do without in other areas. And whether
Right.
they're in this MA plan or not in this MA plan will have a whole other sort of issues that come with it. That could be a whole nother video, but
well,
but
if
this.
folks like us don't speak up for them, no one will.
And I'm disturbed that their own unions aren't speaking up for them, because they're all afraid of, Harry, Henry, and Michael, and no one wants to say anything just because of the
Harry, Henry, and Michael have been where they are way too long.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
they're very comfortable being big shots and maintaining their position. And
well,
just the
remember
same
too,
way we need term limits for politicians.
yeah.
Time for some of these guys to go.
And they make too much money at this point. They're all making six figures. So they
Yeah.
will not understand a $15 copay to a retiree anymore, because they're not in that lifestyle.
Well, there
They
you
make
go.
in 3 weeks what they make in like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, what one of these retirees makes in a year.
Right.
So
Correct.
that says enough right there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Anyway, so I want to say thank you for taking your time out this morning, and
I appreciate you having me.
so everyone, just thank you for watching, and click subscribe if you haven't already, and then one of our other videos you can watch, and visit our YouTube channel for NYC Organization of Public Service Retirees. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.